Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Faith Rackison, the chair of Israel Engagement Committee. Welcome to Greater Metro West's first Unpacking Israel event of 2022. We can't think of Israel without thinking of the IDF, but what do we really know about the IDF and the process of getting drafted? So today we have our community shaliach, Adir Asulin, who's here to tell us about the IDF through his own experiences. So Adir, it's all for you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us. My name is Adir. I'm the community shaliach at Federation. And I'll be talking to you today about the IDF. So let's begin. All right, so today we're going to talk about the IDF, but we're mainly going to talk about the IDF from my perspective, as I'll speak from my experience and my own experience, actually. So when I talk about the IDF, when I speak about the IDF, I think as the IDF as a house, and a house in a sense that it has four walls. And those walls, each wall actually represent some kind of connection between the people who served in the IDF. What are those connections? Let's see. Well, the first wall of connection is a mandatory enlistment. Everyone has to enlist. We're going to talk about each wall. Don't worry about that. I'm not just leaving it right here. So the second wall is boot camp. Everyone has to go through boot camp. The third wall is understanding the nuances of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the fourth wall, well, that's a secret, and we're going to talk about it later on. So let's talk about the first wall connected, the thing that connects the people who served in the IDF. The first wall is a mandatory enlistment. Everyone has to enlist. So obviously, when I'm talking about this, the first question that I'm asking myself is, did I enlist because I had to or because I wanted to? Because in my eyes, I enlist because I wanted to. I mean, I wanted to be part of the IDF. I didn't feel like someone forces me to join. But on the other hand, I know it's a mandatory enlistment. So what is it? I joined because I had to or because I wanted to? And to answer this question, I need to go way back to the time I was just a small boy. This is me, by the way. This is a genuine picture of me. Can you tell? So when I was a small boy, like most of the kids in Israel, well, you see soldiers everywhere. Obviously, because of the conflict, so you see soldiers on TV, but you see them on bus stations, on the street, everywhere. So at some point, I asked my parents, well, the obvious question, am I also going to be a soldier when I'm 18? Obvious question. To that, I got the answer, well, when you'll get to 18, we won't need an army anymore. So you can imagine my relief when I heard that, like, whew, all right, great, good to know. But obviously, when you grow up and you see the reality, you realize, well, I'm going to join the army eventually. Like, I'm going to be a soldier when I get to the age of 18. But the real, well, when it becomes real for the first time, it's when you get to the age of 16, when you get your first call for aptitude test. This is a first call, well, when the army is actually summoning all of them teenagers who are about to enlist when they're going to be 18 to see, well, if they can actually, if they can serve and if they can, in what kind of job or position they can do. So what is actually this first call? So they summon you to this, your closest to your home recruiting office. And then you're going to have like 3 types of tests. The first one is a personal interview. When you sit in front of this nice soldier who asks you personal question about your life. Like, for instance, to me, one of the things that they wanted to ask was, tell us about your family. And I needed to say that my parents are divorced. And this is very interesting in some way. I don't know why, but it's apparently have some effect on, well, your childhood, maybe, the family you come from, maybe even economic resilience of your family. Those stuff sometimes matter. The second test is psychotechnical test, which is of somewhat testing your intelligence and also consistency. Some of the questions repeat themselves to see if you are guessing or you are actually know what you're doing. And the third test is actually a health review, a physical test to see if you're capable of serving and in what position. So after all of that, they present to you with list of stuff you can do in the army, and you can actually choose. Well, you can't really choose. You can say what your preferences are, and not all the time you get what you wanted, but they try to consider it, which is, it's come from the thinking of we want people to be motivated to do the thing that they wanted to do, and they'll be a better soldier that way. So this is the 4 branches of the IDF. There's actually a 5th branch, but we're not gonna talk about it. That's the Special Forces branch. But other than that, we have the Air Force, the Navy, the Ground Forces, and the directorates. In a word about the directorates, just to get your mind straight, in the directorates, we have all of those, intelligence, logistics, cyber defense, manpower, planning, operation. This is all go to directorates. Well, I got to choose from ground forces after my first call. So I could choose between infantry, armored corps, artillery, combat engineering, and field intelligence. I actually went to artillery for several reasons. But the thing is, you need to remember about that. This has become a very social thing. When you're 16, 17, and everybody around you, everybody is going to be enlisted to the army. So this has become very interesting. The question, what do you want to do in the army, has become like a social thing between you and your friends. So that actually brings me back to the question, did I enlist because I had to or because I wanted to? So I'm looking back at my life, and when I was a teenager, everything around me, was revolving the IDF. My parents, they both were an officers in the IDF. All my friends got enlisted. The talk of the day was, how was your day at the first call? How was your test, your aptitude test? So I got to this conclusion. So that the answer to that question, I had the privilege to grow up in a country that has a mandatory military service. Because if I hadn't, I don't know. I really can't tell if I would want to join the army. And I'm glad I did, because that gave me the opportunity to serve my country, and I'm proud of that. But I did it in a way that I felt like I wanted to do that, because everyone around me did that. So to me, it's a pretty strong wall, because it's not just a mandatory enlistment. It's part of a culture. It's something that goes on in your social life. But it's debatable if this wall is strong enough or not, because I'm going to show you a small statistic, for this year enlistment rate, and it's actually a 50% enlistment rate. That means that 50% of the teenagers, 18-year-old teenagers in Israel, actually enlist to the army, to the IDF. 50% aren't. Because actually not everyone has to enlist. Muslim doesn't have to enlist, and sometimes even if they want to enlist, they're not always allowed. Some people ask not to enlist because of religious preferences, some because of mental issues, some because of physical capabilities, some in the aptitude test will find that are not capable of serving. So to this day, we're standing on 50% enlistment rate. So is everyone has to enlist? Is this strong is strong enough? Is this wall strong enough? That's a question. It's a food for thought. To me, it still is. I think it's still strong part in the Israeli culture. And I think it has a huge connection between the people in Israel and, people that actually was in the army. But let's go on to the second wall. Well, the second wall is the wall of connection. Everyone has to go through boot camp. So this is a very interesting, actually, boot camp is really weird phenomenon in human world. Let's talk about that for a bit. So when actually you became 18 eventually and you realize that you're going to enlist to the army, there's the day of enlistment, the drafting day. It can be very stressful day if you're not prepared, because this is like a huge factory line. You go through, they give you uniform, they give you bag, they give you shoes, laces, socks, underwear, and a big bag, like going on a bus. And they took me on a night bus because I went to artillery corps. They took me to the artillery training base, which is Shivta. A second in Hebrew, what is actually the artillery corps? In Hebrew, it's Totchanim, which is come from the word Totach, which is cannon in English. Singular for male and female in English, it's the same. It's a gunner. A soldier in the artillery corps, it's called a gunner. A male, a singular male in Hebrew is Totchan. A singular female is Totchanit. A plural male and females in English, obviously it's the same, it's gunners. In Hebrew, plural male are Totchanim and female are Totchaniot. A second in Hebrew, that's all. So they took me on a night bus to Shivta. Shivta is the training base of all artillery in the IDF. Where is Shivta? This is a great question. You probably recognize the Israeli Negev. So here basically is Shivta. You probably can see it. Let's zoom in. Yes, right there. Still can't see it. This is Shivta. See Shivta right here in the red circle? You see all the nothingness surrounding it? This is the feeling going to Shivta, especially on the night bus. So in a closer look to Shivta, just to show you, this is the base. This is actually the boot camp part of the base. This is team leaders training. This is officer training. This is the main dining room. It actually brings up a lot of good memories. But it looks small. I don't know if it looks small to you. This is relatively a big base, a large base in the IDF, one of the biggest training base in Israel. So who goes into artillery corps training base? Well, we have in artillery, we have the cannon array, the rocket array, which is where I was in the rocket array, the positioning array, the unmanned craft array, and the precise armament array. So let's go back for the first day. So they took me on a night bus to Shivta, and I got to tell you, this was a scary moment. You get down from the bus, you see nothing, it's so dark. They take you, you need to talk to this officer and to the doctor and to the dentist, take you everywhere, go to here, go to there, you don't see where you are. And in the middle of the night, they tell you, now you can go to sleep. Now there was a tradition, I don't know if it's still on, I think it is. There was a tradition that team leader training actually did their first night target practice on the day that the rookies came to boot camp, the first night actually. So basically what you heard all night was huge, big booms and bangs all night long. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is dangerous. Like, this is definitely frightening. But it was all right. As you can see, I survived the night and you begin boot camp. Now, boot camp, as I said before, it's a very weird situation. Like, someone can ask you, well, tell us about boot camp, and you wouldn't know what to say because you feel like you're doing nothing. Like, most of the time, of course, they taught you how to use a gun and shoot a cannon, and they put you into shape. But most of the time, there's this team leader who are telling you, well, now 20 seconds, go form a formation right there. And you go, you run, you try to do that, and you can't make it. Well, you didn't make it. Now try 20 seconds, put a formation right here. And you do this all day long. And at some point you saying to yourself, we got to do this. We can do this, guys. We can do this. Let's do this under 20 seconds. Come on, let's finish with this. Let's do something important. And the team leader goes, well, 20 seconds, go form a formation here. And you made it. The company made it. You made a formation in 20 seconds and you're very proud of yourself. And the team leader goes, well, good job, you guys. You did a great job. because you did such a great job, I think you can do it in 15 seconds now. So in 15 seconds, please form a formation there. So you think to yourself, what's the point? Well, luckily for us, I actually had the privilege to be a team leader and company vice leader in bootcamp. So I can share the secrets of the goals of bootcamp. If you're ready for that, I guess you are. All right, so what are the goals of bootcamp? We have 4 goals. The first one is basic training. You want to take an 18 years old kid and you want to teach him the basic of military expertise, like how to use a gun, how to, well, in the artillery corps, how to shoot a cannon and stuff like that, to put you in shape, to, to make you a soldier. So this is goal number 1. Goal number 2 is discipline. And this is by far the most important goal. How do I know this? Because it's also goal number 3 and number 4. And I'm not making this up. This is actually the 4 goals of bootcamp. Every team leader on bootcamp gets a notebook with those goals written on it. And why is this so important? Well, you can ask me, well, Adi, why is this so important? I mean, basic training is important, as soldiers need to know how to use a gun. So at the end of bootcamp, the commander, the base commander, who actually have a responsibility of all the companies in bootcamp, he sits down at the end of bootcamp, which each company leader, there are 6 company leaders, 6 company in bootcamps companies. He sit down with every company leader, and he goes name by name on every soldier, and he asks him how this guy performed on basic training. And most of the time, he scored pretty good score. But sometimes, well, the company leader would say, well, this guy, he doesn't really know how to use a gun properly. For this, the commander of the base would tell him, you know what, all right, he's gonna have time to practice it later on the next phase of the army. So let's move on. But then he's gonna talk about how this guy performed mentally. Can this guy take an order? Because in the army, you need to know how to take an order. There's no time for asking questions. There's no time to debate on efficiency. You're a soldier and you have a commander to tell you what to do. If he tells you to go in 20 seconds to go there and form a formation, you need to do that without asking questions. And sometimes if the company leader would say, well, this guy is not mentally prepared, sometimes the commander of the base, the guy responsible for all boot camps in the artillery corps, he would say, well, this guy, he cannot be a fighter. He needs to go to do something else. Some of the times in extreme situation, he would even recommend that this soldier would be discharged from the army, because this is the most important part of boot camp. To take those 18-year-old kids who are actually, well, they just got out of high school, they were the free as they can, and to turn them into soldier, part of a system. Sometimes it sounds like it's a bad thing, but this is how military works. Like, it's important to have people in the same page. People come to the boot camp from so many places. Someone has a greater mental capacity than the other guy, but they're going to do the same job either way. So the thing is, the connection here is that actually everyone has to go through that. Everyone that went in the military, the chief of staff, he had to go through boot camp. He was this young little soldier that someone shouted at him what to do. Go 20 seconds, go to there. Gal Gadot need to do that. Bibi Netanyahu need to do that. Naftali Bennett need to do that. Our Rishonim who are here, they're going to do that in 6 months from now. Everyone's going to do that. I did it. My parents did it. Everyone. A word about the Rishonim. They're going to enlist our loved Rishonim. If you can clap, so clap, please. They are doing a wonderful job. Look how cute they are. So they're going to enlist to the army next year, although they're already 18, because they're doing something that's called year of service. This is Shnat Sharut. This is something they volunteer to do before they actually enlist. It doesn't shorten their service time. They're going to do 3 years at least, but they have addition year that they're doing for their country, for Israel. So, up to them. Way to go, guys. They're here. So I'm telling them way to go. All right, so this is the second wall. To me, it's a very strong wall. It actually kept me going on boot camp. Like to think about my prime minister going through the same thing, I don't know, make me, my parents, they do the same thing. So I think it's a very strong wall. So we talked about the first wall and mandatory enlistment. Everyone has to enlist. We talked about boot camp. Everyone has to go through boot camp. We still have 2 walls left. And also, if you have questions, we're gonna answer questions at the end. So write your questions at chat, and we'll talk about them at the end of the presentation. So the third wall, as you can see, is understanding the nuances of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So this is a very interesting wall. So let's talk about it for a second. This is the West Bank. I don't know if you know about that or ever saw it on a map, but this is it. This is the West Bank. Now, a unit in the army, in the IDF, it can do one of 2 things. One, train for war that may or may not come. And the second is actually hold the line. This is how they say it in Hebrew, hold the line in the West Bank or Gaza, the Gaza Strip. So this is the West Bank, and this is where my unit, actually, this is what we do when we were in training for war. And my first time at the West Bank was in Nablus. This is Nablus, this is Shechem, all right? This is what we see right here, this is Shechem. This is my first time at the West Bank as a soldier, and actually, it was my first time at the West Bank, and I was already a team leader. I wasn't a simple soldier anymore. I had a team of my own. And this is actually the first time that I had to go to the West Bank. So this is Shechem. You can see it from above. This is where our little base was, all right here. This is where we, we stationed near Shechem. And in a base like that, a mission like that has all kinds of missions. It does, sometimes you need to do some arrests or ambushes or patrols. And one mission in particular, I did the most on my company, and it was, it's called a pillbox, a watchtower. This is a watchtower that was close to Shechem. And in this particular watchtower, you can put like 4 or 5 soldiers. They sleep there for the whole week. And 3 times a day, they need to form a roadblock to stop any suspicious vehicle to go from Shechem to Israel. So you do that for 3 times a day. You do the roadblock, you go back to the pillbox, you do the roadblock again, pillbox again. You do that for a week, and then someone going to replace you. This is where the pillbox station, my pillbox. This is where my base. This is the pillbox. This is Shechem. So to me, doing that activity, it was very problematic because I would stand there in my roadblock, and at the beginning it was simple. Where are you going? Why are you going there? All right, please move. Some of the time you got tips, like they would tell you, if you see this and that car, please stop it, arrest the guy on this car. But most of the time it was pretty boring. And what bothered me the most, that sometimes in the back seat of the cars that I had to stop, there were children that, well, they looked at you and you can tell that, well, they hate you. They don't like you. And not because who you are, just because the uniform you wear on and what you need to do. And to be honest and to tell my personal perspective, I kind of understood them, because if someone that I perceive as a foreign soldier stood in the entrance of my home and tried to ask me some question, why do you want to go to your home? I don't think I'd like them so much either. So it actually kind of bothered me. I didn't like that feeling. As a teenager, I grew up in a youth movement, and I love children and I love kids, and I could stand adults don't like me, but I couldn't stand kids don't like me. So I had this feeling for a time, for a couple of weeks, and then something happened. Well, we were on a regular roadblock doing our stuff, and I got a phone call from my superior officer telling me, we got a tip. If you see a black Honda, please stop the car and call us if he's there, and we're gonna come there and we're gonna arrest him. And I was like, all right. We put the roadblock for 3.5 hours, and the time to close the roadblock has come, and the black Honda never came. I called to my superior and told him, well, he didn't show up. I'm closing the roadblock. And it was like, give it to 10 more minutes. They're saying he's on his way. He didn't show up for another 10 minutes. So I gave the call again. It was like 5 more minutes. And after 5 more minutes, I called him again. It was like my superior officer told me, you know what, it's probably not going to show up. Close the roadblock, fold it. So as we were closing the roadblock, I saw this car. It wasn't black Honda. It was a white Nissan. And don't ask me why, because I don't really know. I was like, I can't even tell you why. Please stop. I look at that car. We folded the roadblock. I should let him go past, but I told him, please stop, step aside. And as he stepped aside, I told him to get out of the vehicle. I asked him where he was going. Something about him filled off, and I told him to open the trunk, and there it was, 4 packs of C4, which is explosive devices, and 2 AKs, which are assault rifles. To be honest, I was frightened. I was, startled. I was like, what am I seeing? Obviously, we arrest him. To my surprise, he didn't even, try to run or anything like that. It was like, all right, arrest me. But it got me thinking. On the one hand, I had those children faces not good feeling that children are hating me because of what I'm doing. And on the other hand, I have this experience where I felt like if I wouldn't stop that car, people could have hurt. People could get hurt. So those are the nuances of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not that simple. It's not black and white. And before you see them, before you experience them, sometimes it feels like it's black and white. Sometimes it feels like you have the right answer all along. But to me, that experience really enhanced the feeling that, well, it's complicated. And to have a better understanding of the situation, I should at least respect the experiences of people who went there, because we're not all the time agreeing. Like someone else in my shoes could have the same experience and come to other conclusion. But also, well, let me give you an example. I have a friend, he serves in a very prestigious intelligence unit called A200. And we talked, it's not actually a friend, he's a colleague. And we talked about, politics and stuff. And he was like, well, to me, the IDF is not ethical organization. And I was like, well, I had a different experience. I think it's very ethical. And he was like, well, in my experience, well, we tapped phone and well, I didn't like it. And I think it's not ethical. I asked him, well, some of the time, have you managed to do some actual arrest because of those tapping? And it was like, yes, but still, I think it's unethical from my experience. So I maybe not agree with him, but I could respect his opinion because I know he had some experience that maybe I haven't. But there's like the first wall, we can ask ourselves, is this wall is really strong enough? Because, today with all the lack of empathy and increase of polarization and social media, are we still, respecting each other experiences and opinions specifically about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Well, if you'll ask me, I'll tell you that I think there's a difference between what we see in the media and in social media and to what happens actually, well, between people when people talk. And I think this wall is strong. Well, I think the experience people go through in the army help them respect the opinions, well, of their fellow, Israelis who have maybe different opinion on the situation. So that's the third wall. Let's go on to the fourth wall. Well, the fourth wall, the last wall, it's a secret. And to understand that secret, I need to tell you a little bit about my battalion. So I was in a battalion which actually used not cannons, used rockets. This is actually an American weapon. This is called a multi-launching rocket system. The IDF using it since the 1990. It's an American weapon, just for you to know. So this was my battalion. We expertise on rocket. And well, I need to tell you that this battalion specifically is a mixed gender battalion. So all, female and male serves there. So one of the company leader was actually a female leader. Her name is Bareket. And I'm showing you this picture because Bareket in Hebrew is emerald. And she was amazing. And I'm telling you, she was the best. She was the best company leader by far. Everybody wants to be in her company because, well, her company always was the best in everything. She did the most arrests. She did the best training in sports day. Her company made all the first places. Everybody adored her, also including me and my friends. She was really the best. Well, time has come and she eventually got out of the army and I became a young officer. And me and my friend, we decided to go to a restaurant on a weekend. My friends from, well, the battalion. So we were sitting there in the restaurant and some familiar voice goes like, "Hey guys, how are you? Good to see you." And I'm looking at the waitress that said that and I'm like, I'm not recognizing her until one of my friends goes like, "Hey Bareket, how are you? Good to see you." And I was realized the waitress is actually Bareket, the company leader that we used to adore and, you know, maybe sometimes fear from. I actually feared, she was intimidating, but never mind. So it was nice to see her and it was very exciting as she wanted to catch up what's going on in the battalion and stuff like that. But mostly I got to tell you, it was awkward. I mean, she was a company leader. She was in charge of 100 people. And she did it great, by the way. To me, she could be the prime minister. Like, definitely, I would vote for her, no doubt. So to see her waiting table, there's not something wrong about waiting tables, just it was weird. I was expecting to see her doing something else. But don't forget that. I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to go back to that situation. Don't worry about that. So a year goes by, a couple of years goes by, and my time to get out of the army actually comes. And what you see here, it's a choger. It's soldier ID. Choger soldier ID. This is how it's called in Israel. So what you're seeing actually is someone cutting his choger. This is something you have to do when you got out of the army. You need to cut it out. So my time has come to get out of the army, and it's actually a pretty exciting time for a soldier thinking about the time he's going to leave the army. And everybody was asking me, "What you gonna do? You're gonna get out of the army? What you gonna do?" And I was like, "I have a great plan. I have an amazing plan. Well, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to sleep until I'm hungry, and then I'm gonna eat until I'm gonna get sleepy again." And then I'm going to eat. And I'm going to do that for 3 months in a row. And everyone I told that plan to was like, "Way to go, man. This is a great plan. Amazing. So jealous of you. You're going to do great." So yeah, my time came to leave the army. It was actually a very emotional day. I was leaving the army. I was an officer. I was a company vice leader. I had a lot of friends and a lot of responsibility, and it was a very emotional day to leave the army. But the thing that actually, when I want to say, got frustrated me the most, because this device, this is an old phone because, well, I got out of the army 8 years ago, maybe 9. Well, the thing is, in the second you became an officer, they give you one of these, and from the second you get that, it's always ringing. It's always ringing. You always need someone. You're always texting. You have a lot of responsibility and you use this phone a lot. It's always on. And the day of the day I got out from the army, I was still using it because people want to know, "Hey, where did you put that? What do you do when?" Stuff like that. But the day after, like I went to sleep, I woke up, the day after, this phone, silent. Nobody calls you. It feels like nobody needs you anymore. And I had a lot of responsibility and I felt like I was an important person when I left the army. And all of a sudden, well, you felt like you've been replaced, which I was being replaced. Someone replaced me. And it's not because anybody, try to kick me out of the army. People from the army don't want to call me because they don't want to bother me when I'm not in the army anymore. Friends from home, they don't used to call me on the weekend, on days on the week, only on the weekend, because they used to me being in the army. So the phone is silent. Nobody needs you. It's a very sad feeling. It has very mixed emotions. For the one hand, you want to get out in the army. From the second hand, what's now? So what now? I had a great plan, right? I had a huge plan to sleep and then to eat and to sleep and to eat for 3 months. And let me tell you something, it lasted 3 days. 3 days. After 3 days, I was like, all right, that's enough. That's enough. Something needs to change. I was a company vice leader. I want to do something with my life. So I was like, I shouted to my mom, Mom, we need to talk. And she was like, all right, let's talk. What do you want to talk about? Listen, Mom, I can't stay here. Like, I was in the army, I was a company, I was an officer, I was an important person. I need to do something with my life. And she was like, all right, great. What do you want to do? And I told her, I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to travel to the East. I want to open my horizons. I want to see new cultures. She was like, all right, that's great. Sounds amazing. What else? I want to learn something. I want to go to the university and learn something. I want to have a profession. I want to train in something. I want to learn something new. I have the motivation to do that now. She was like, all right, something else? Yes, definitely. I'm going to move out. Listen, Mom, nothing, against you. I love you very much, but I can't stay here. Like, I was a company vice leader. I can't stay with my mom. I need to rent a place in Tel Aviv, in the city. So please let me do mine. It's nothing against you. I just need to rent an apartment. All right, how are you going to get to that apartment? Well, I'm going to buy a car, definitely. I need a car because I can't use yours because I was a company vice leader, so I'm going to buy a car. And she told me, she looked at me and she was like, you know what? This is a great plan. It's much better than the old plan you had. So this is a great plan. But, all of those things, they require, money. And I was like, so what? No problem. I'll go to work. All right, what do you want to do? So I told her, well, I don't know exactly what I want to do. I just know I want to be a CEO of a major company. And she looked at me and she was like, you know what? This is a great ambition, but maybe start with something small. Maybe, wait table, because you need to start from somewhere. And obviously, in that second, I was immediately remembering Bareket, my former company leader. And at that moment, I had huge respect for her, like I never had before. Because and this is the fourth wall, everyone had to ask himself eventually, who am I outside the IDF? I'm going to start all over again. Well, unless, of course, you're staying in the IDF, it's going to be a career. Some people do that. But also, like Benny Gantz, when he became chief of staff, he was outside of the army. They actually called him and says, like, we're looking for a chief of staff. Please return. So most of the people had to ask themselves, who am I outside of the army? Bareket, my former company leader, she had to do that. My parents need to do that. And I needed to do that. Like, I felt like I was someone so important and I had tons of responsibility, but I had to start over again. I had to ask myself, who am I? How do I reach? I finally realized I want to feel that feeling of responsibility and to be needed. All right, how do I get there? What do I do from now? And sometimes it can be a frustrating feeling because you feel like I achieved something. I worked 4.5 years because I was an officer. I worked 4.5 years to build myself, and now I need to do it all over again. But this is why this wall is so strong to me, because it's not about something that you have to do, and it's not something that you went through. It's something that challenges you mentally, and it happens to everyone. And some people, travel to see the world. Some people go to university right away because they want to learn something. They have the motivation. Some people, you hear about relating Israel to the startup nation. I think it's related. People want to do something with their life. They have motivation to do that. So this is the fourth wall. In summary, the fourth wall of connections the thing that connect the people who served in the army. A mandatory enlistment, everyone has to enlist. Everyone has to go through this. They had to, they want to. Is this part of a culture? Boot camp, everyone has to go through boot camp. Naftali Bennett went through boot camp. You can think about that. You can picture his face running around in sloppy uniforms. He needed to do that. Understanding the nuances of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, most of the people in the IDF, well, they had some ethical question about what they're doing, about that. And of course, the question, dealing with the question, who am I outside the IDF? So that's it. This is the summary of my experience. Hopefully you learned something. I opened your horizon, give you food for thoughts. And if you have questions, well, this is the time.
Adir, thank you. That was so wonderful and gave a lot of us insight into the IDF, but through your stories and your perspective and things can be very complex. So thank you for that. We do have a few questions coming in and we'll see what we can get through time-wise. But one then is for those who stay in the Army after their mandatory service, how does that work? Are they asked to? Do they choose to? What's the process?
Well, yes. So I try to. There are two types of staying in the Army after the mandatory service time. The first one, they call it Keva Rishon, like the first period of time, which is most of the time, year and a half. And it's what most of the officers are doing. You want to become an officer and your commanders like recommend you, they tell you, you think you're very good, we think you can be an officer, or you came with this motivation and you're like, I want to be an officer, and you go to Bahad Echad, which is the main training facility for all of the officers in the IDF. And you became an officer and you have to be an officer for an additional year and a half. After that, well, this is the second period of time. Most of the time, they would ask you to stay. The Army, the IDF would ask you, well, we think you're good, we have a position for you, we have an offer to you. Most of the time, the conditions would be better. You get maybe funding for education in a period of time. And this is when people start thinking about the IDF more as a career, something to do more than just few years, 6 years, maybe for a lifetime. But I definitely would separate those two. The first year and a half of officers, this is most of the officers, this is what they do. And the second period of time, which can be a long period of time.
Thank you.
Hopefully, yeah.
Another question that came in privately was, do you know anyone who did not serve, and how do people relate to them, and how do they relate to others since they didn't have that shared experience?
All right, so I'd say I grew up in a town near Modi'in, and Modi'in is known in Israel for its high rate of enlistment rate. So most of the people I know who I went to school with are actually, well, was enlisted and actually became fighter and stuff like that. But personal story here, my ex-girlfriend at the time, she didn't enlist, and because she stated for a mental problem that she'd better not be part of the IDF because of her mental state. And most of the time, actually, the IDF won't take any chances. If you as a teenager will come and say, I have a mental problem and I prefer not to be in the Army, they would let you out. They don't want that headache, let's say it like that. So where I came from, well, I guess someone who was not enlisted would be, I don't want to say outcast, but you would talk about them. It would be like, this is weird, he's not enlisted. He could do something, he could help. But also, it's changes where you live, like what you're doing. Idan, my wife, part of her job in the Army was to work in a city called Akko and to work with kids who known they don't want to go to the army. Like this is have a low rate of enlistment, and she had as part of her military service, she had to work with children there and to show them that the military experience it's good for them. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, we have time for one more question. And a question came up about training for people who make Aliyah in their 30s or 40s. Is there anything for them to do?
Well, I don't want to. Well, all right. I'm not an authority in the idea. I don't want to say something like I'm sharing what I know from my experience. Most of the time, the IDF would choose not to enlist people in these types of ages because part of being in the IDF, mostly fighters, a study shows that when people have to charge under fire, say it like that, they don't do that for the flag or country. They do it for the men next to them. So the social bonding in the IDF, in your unit in the IDF, it's important. So they try to keep the ages match. So most of the time, they don't want to enlist people at this age group. But I know it happens. Like I've seen it, and it happens. And I guess it has something to do with, personal. It's more personal than general law, I guess, rule.
We have to end there. We have more questions, and they're good questions. So maybe we can do some kind of follow-up because this is obviously very interesting to people. So Adir, thank you so much. This was wonderful. And now I'll introduce Rebecca Gold, who is the chair of Global Connections.
Thank you so much. As Faith said, I'm Rebecca Gold, chair of Global Connections. I'm so happy that you joined us. I hope you found this presentation interesting and that Adir's experience taught you a few things and exciting things about the IDF, certainly more nuanced things. Adir, thank you for sharing your personal story with us. And thank you to our Global Connections professionals, and especially to our volunteer, Faith Rakison, chair of Israel Engagement and her committee. You are phenomenal. Through Global Connections, we are committed to building meaningful connections, living bridges between our Jewish community and our partners in Israel and with Jews around the world. As they say on PBS, what we do is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of our donors, large and small, our volunteers and our professionals. We are a remarkable team of dedicated Jewish community members. Join us on March 23rd for Unpacking the Diaspora, a virtual tour of several Jewish communities outside the US and Israel. Please be on the lookout for the follow-up email with a survey regarding this program. We really need your feedback, good and not so good. If you would like to stay on for a few minutes to visit and give each other a shout out, please feel free to unmute now. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.